The truth about Task Force 141, TF145. We've all heard of the deadly Navy SEALs and Delta Force. But what happens when you combine the best units from the US and UK into one single unit? You get the deadliest military team the world has ever seen. They were precisely deadly, and most importantly, they never failed to take out any target. Today, we will dive into the story of the most brutal military team to ever exist, Task Force 145. In 2003, the United States launched a full-force invasion of Iraq with the goal of disarming it of weapons of mass destruction. This invasion ended Saddam Hussein's government and reign of terror, freeing the Iraqi people. However, the invasion would not come cheap and proved to be costly in resources, time, and personnel. With the ever-growing need for unconventional forces, the battlefield was undergoing a transformation. The enemy wasn't always obvious. Specific missions demanded highly trained special units capable of destroying the enemy with as little information as possible. These units were capable of neutralizing high-value targets with the utmost precision, leaving room for no errors. Because of this, Special Operations Forces were beginning to make bigger impacts on the war effort. With the ever-growing need for specially trained personnel, an unprecedented situation was at hand. A super secretive and highly trained unit able to work seamlessly to accomplish international objectives and efforts was needed more than ever. This is where the beginnings of Task Force 145, one of the most secretive, effective, and deadly Tier 1 units in the world, was created. This is the story of Task Force 145. Before we continue, take a moment to like the video, subscribe to this channel, and turn on the notification bell to get notified anytime we post amazing videos like this. Alright, back to the video. Abu Musab al-Zarqawi was a notorious terrorist leader who wreaked havoc in the Middle East for years. He was the mastermind behind a number of gruesome and deadly attacks, eventually placing him as the most wanted man in Jordan and Iraq. So much so that the US government offered a $25 million reward for information leading to his capture. This was the same amount they offered for the capture of Osama bin Laden. Even after the capture of Saddam Hussein, there was still a heavy terrorist presence in Iraq. Therefore, combating terrorism was a major goal for the United States during the Iraqi invasion, as it was taking a deadly toll on military personnel and the citizens of Iraq. Because there was so much work to be done, the U.S. wasn't doing it alone. The United Kingdom had joined forces on this endeavor, with thousands of troops and a multitude of agencies scattered throughout Iraq. Intelligence was being collected and utilized for various missions regarding high-value terrorists, targets, and assets. Both the United States and the United Kingdom were receiving information overload. Most of the intel they received was either unreliable or led to dead ends. Every second wasted risked potential for more lives being lost, so action needed to be taken quickly. In 2004, however, things changed. General Stanley McChrystal, who had recently taken command of Joint Special Operations Command, JSOC, pushed for the formation of an elite unit capable of handling very delicate operations. McChrystal was dismayed by the poor coordination and rivalry between U.S. and British Special Operations Forces operating in Iraq at the time. There were tensions over policies on detainee interrogation and transparency, differences in military cultures and command structures, and a lack of unified purpose. Both nations had elite units hunting high-value targets like Abu Musab al-Zarqawi, but there was unhealthy competition rather than true collaboration. The UK Special Air Services SAS and Special Boat Services SBS were aggressive but often failed to share intelligence or plans with counterparts like Delta Force and SEAL Team 6. Each side was racing for glory and credit for kills and captures. To remedy this, McChrystal set out to build an integrated multinational task force, fusing together all special operations elements under a streamlined leadership structure. The goals were centralized coordination of high-value target raids to prevent redundancies in failed operations, seamless sharing of intelligence to leverage both U.S. and U.K. assets, and interoperability between previously siloed elite units. The new task force would combine the best assault troops, intelligence cells, technology specialists, and support units from both nations. It was dubbed Task Force 145 and placed under the joint command of British SAS legend General Jack Stirrup and U.S. Major General Del Daly. Under this unified leadership model, the task force could draw on the strengths of SAS reconnaissance, SBS maritime operations, U.S. air power, superior American signals intelligence, SIGINT, and aggressive Delta or SEAL door kickers. The fusion would eliminate previous friction while leveraging the unique capabilities of both nations to better prosecute the hunt for high-value targets across Iraq. Zarqawi was target number one. But the hope was Task Force 145 could evolve into a permanent fixture, able to quickly adapt to emergency threats worldwide. Top military officials from both sides put their differences aside and created one of the most elite counterterrorism units ever conceived. The core assault operations of Task Force 145 came from the elite of the elite in the American and British arsenals. Delta Force, SEAL Team 6, the SAS and SBS supplied the door kickers, breachers, precision marksmen, and other direct action specialists. These units were no strangers to high-risk kill or capture missions against dangerous targets. Delta had undertaken Operation Red Dawn to eliminate Saddam Hussein and his sons Uday and Qusay just the year before. The SAS has a history of covert operations dating back to World War II, including the Iranian embassy siege. SEAL Team 6 conducted vital reconnaissance ahead of the Abbottabad raid that would kill bin Laden years later. The SBS went on during undercover ops against the IRA in the 70s. Together, these four made up the sharpest shooters and most seasoned assaulters under the Task Force 145 banner. Supporting the assault team were vital enablers like the Intelligence Support Activity, ISA, which specialized in signal intercepts, and running indigenous assets. Air Force commandos who called in airstrikes, CIA officers, MI6 direct action teams, over 1,000 elite operators from a dozen nations ultimately enabled TF145's hunter-killer methodology. Overseeing it all were experienced generals like Del Daly, who commanded a platoon in Vietnam before leading JSOC for 5 years, and Stanley McChrystal, a former Ranger who helped design the counterterrorism structures implemented after 9/11. Their leadership ensured the seamless integration of so many disparate parts into a ruthless terrorist targeting machine. Task Force 145 was also given considerable freedom to hunt down and neutralize or capture suspected insurgents. They were quite literally authorized to conduct raids without higher approval, and were able to act quickly based on the latest intelligence. This was all done through a concept known as the unblinking eye. The unblinking eye was a reference to Task Force 145's relentless tempo of operations designed to continuously pressure insurgent networks. There was no downtime between missions. Intelligence gathered from one raid was immediately exploited to target additional objectives. Sometimes follow-on raids occurred within just hours. It worked like this. Delta, SEALs, and SAS assaulters would kick down doors and snatch suspects based on the latest intel. Supporting elements would then sweep the site, collecting phones, laptops, documents, anything to extract information about the next target's location. Interrogators and analysts would work furiously to track communications and movements of the wider network. Before the last mission's attackers had even removed their body armor, strike packages were already being prepped and briefed for the next location. When tactical vehicles rolled up to the suspected hideout, the unblinking eye meant there was no rest for insurgent leadership trying to evade the task force gaze. By mid-2005, records showed Task Force 145 averaging 300 raids per month with a mission pace of 10 operations every single day. They neutralized over 200 Zarqawi lieutenants and associates during these actions. But the unblinking eye drew controversy as well. Human rights groups accused the task force of extreme interrogation tactics, crossing the line into torture. The detainees were allegedly subject to sleep deprivation, isolation, and painful stress positions at black sites. Many ended up imprisoned long-term without due process. The rates of capture also led to overcrowding problems. Some critics argue that in the rush to mount raids so quickly, there was insufficient vetting of sources and intel, leading to compromised operations and dead civilians. The unblinking eye success came at a moral cost, according to its detractors. Zarqawi, however, wasn't that easy to catch. He escaped capture dozens of times as Task Force 145 relentlessly pursued him throughout 2005 and 2006. Once, he escaped a military checkpoint because the soldiers weren't able to properly identify him. Operators described near misses where they expected to finally corner the terrorist leader, only to find empty hideouts long abandoned. Gradually, the task force was able to build a pattern of life analysis, tracking his movements by pooling intelligent resources across agencies. Finally, they intercepted communications between Zarqawi and his spiritual advisor and traced Zarqawi to the town of Baquba. The U.S. military quickly acted on this intel and prepared 2 500-pound bombs to be dropped onto his hideout. When Zarqawi sought a meeting with associates at a safe house on June 7, 2006, TF145 requested an airstrike from U.S. Central Command. An F-16 was redirected to drop 2 500-pound JDAM bombs onto the building, where Zarqawi was conferring with his followers. Operators arrived in the aftermath, finding Zarqawi barely alive in the rubble. He died shortly thereafter while under medical evaluation, ultimately succumbing to blast lung injuries consistent with bombs of that size. DNA evidence confirmed his identity. The neutralization of Zarqawi was no easy feat and marked the termination of one of Iraq's most prominent terrorist leaders. His demise uplifted the spirits of the U.S. and UK and significantly weakened terrorist groups in the area. Not only did Task Force 145 achieve its primary mission of eliminating Zarqawi, but it also succeeded in accomplishing its secondary objective. Task Force 145 apprehended thousands of terrorists under Zarqawi. This success came at a huge cost, however. The unit lost 18 operators, with Delta Force suffering a casualty rate of roughly 20%, and Special Air Service with 6 troops killed in action and 30 injured. Despite having accomplished their primary objective, there was still plenty more work to be done. Even though Zarqawi was out of the picture, one man's life did not signal the end to the rampant terrorism throughout the country. Following Zarqawi's demise and the degradation of AQI, the task force continued evolving into a broader counterterrorism weapon. By 2010, it was known as Task Force 13, with responsibility expanded outside Iraq to enable global classified operations. Several key leaders involved went on to even higher positions, taking the lessons from this elite joint task force with them. General Stanley McChrystal was appointed to command all U.S. and international forces in Afghanistan before retiring. British SAS leader General Jock Stirrup served as the United Kingdom's Chief of Defense Staff. These commanders brought expertise in special operation integration that has become a model for joint task forces required to respond quickly to terrorist threats worldwide. The cross-pollination legacy and fusion cell structure of TF145 lives on in how the Pentagon conducts modern clandestine warfare. In the shadowy world of special ops and counterterrorism, formal honors are rare, but testimony to TF145's success abounds in the continued global demand for intelligence coordination, strike packages, and interoperability drawn from its groundbreaking example targeting al-Qaeda's most dangerous leaders at the height of the Iraq War. Their sacrifices and lethal effectiveness weakened the Iraqi insurgency at a pivotal time, saving countless lives. What do you think about the brave sacrifices of members of the elite Task Force 145 unit? Let us know in the comments.